maybe try and set out what we're hoping to create in terms of the environment and the nature of the discussion tonight. So I'm not going to call it ground rules, but that's really what I'm talking about. So we really want this to be a respectful debate for people to listen to each other, to avoid any political mudslinging. Let's show the national politicians how to do it properly. We're going to try and be inclusive. So be patient. I'm going to try and keep us from going down too many rabbit holes. This issue is enormous and we're not going to cover everything tonight. So I'm going to try and stop us getting sucked into too many rabbit holes. If we do get sucked in, we might just have to dig our way out again. Please, let's try and stay on the topic. This is about the environment. It is not, I'm afraid, going to be the Great North Street debate. So let's just put that one to bed right now. Particularly candidates, but not only candidates. If you're using acronyms, can you explain them? Because not everybody kind of is, really embedded in the kind of policy jargon. Feel free to go to the loo, which is around there, get a drink, wander outside, stretch your legs, be comfortable. We'd like you to sort of have a good evening and not feel it's too difficult. And I think we really want to keep this positive and constructive. That's the overall message for all of this. We'll talk a little bit about how we're going to handle the questions after the candidates have given their introduction. And my friend here is going to be a number of things, but a waffleometer is what I'm holding in my hand here. So I'm going to try and avoid too much waffle, okay? That's mainly to the candidates, but not only to the candidates. So we've got 6 candidates on the platform here, and we've got an additional representative in the audience. Lawrence, are you okay to talk at the end? Yeah, cool. As I said, we weren't able to invite everybody who wanted to participate to be on the panel just for sheer numbers. So what we're going to do is ask each candidate to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes to really set out their stall in terms of their environmental vision and what they would like to do if they're elected next week. We're going to run in alphabetical order of the party name at the beginning, and then at the very end, I'm not going to give you another 3 minutes at the very end, we'll be looking for a quick reflection. We'll reverse that order and go from the end of the alphabet back up again. So that's the plan. I think I've got, my husband is going to wave at me when we're getting near to the end of 3 minutes, and we're going to be quite ruthless, as you would expect if we were in a council meeting as well. So we're going to really stop at the 3 minutes. So I hope that sounds okay. Is that all right for guys up here? Brilliant. Okay, so thank you. Has anyone got any questions or worries, or does that sound okay as a way for running the evening? Yeah. Brilliant. Okay.
Worth pointing out there are still some empty seats at the front. Be brave.
There's no audience participation. It's not like being at the panto or anything where you get to
You don't know that.
Or maybe. Right. Okay. So 3 minutes for each candidate, and then we'll go into some of the questions and we'll talk about how to run that at the end. So the order is Richard, Sam, Ramsey, Brian, George, Maddie and Lawrence. So if you'd like to just introduce yourself when you start, that would probably be helpful for folk who may not know you.
I'm Richard Mills. I'm a candidate for Castle Ward. I come new to local and indeed national politics, having been for a long time a senior civil servant, and therefore all this was verboten, and then travelling on international environmental issues for some years afterwards. Anyway, I'm here and very pleased and very happy to be here. I feel I have actually, in a way, an unfair advantage over most of my colleagues here, because the Conservatives have, of course, always been a party of the environment and the countryside.
Remember what I said?
Hold on.
Be kind.
You may be all too young to remember the 1970s and the Rio conference that started the whole process off. But I refer to you also to the first Environment White Paper, to Margaret Thatcher's raising of the climate flag, to which we are successors here today, the National Air Quality Strategy, and most recently the UK epochal commitment to net zero by 2050. The fact is that British Conservatives have consistently and uniquely led on the global environment. Now, that sort of leadership is not something that I necessarily convey to us at local level. What, in Conservative view, we have to do is we have to show, and this is the sort of leadership we have to show positive concrete, effective delivery of the policies which are there and out there, and through that show how things can be done. Too much consideration of long-term goals, the setting of goals and targets and all the rest, is not what really at this stage we need, and it's not what you will get from the Conservatives. It will be essentially delivery, delivery, delivery. That, of course, means we have to focus on those areas that are within the Council's competence. On housing, where, of course, retrofitting is needed to reduce heat loss and all the rest of it. We have to focus also on planning to ensure that every aspect of our policies are taken into account in every planning decision that is made. We have to be innovative in transport on those small few residual things that a borough council can do, such as, I don't know, subsidies to allow taxis to move to greener fuels. So all of those are the things we can do and need to do. And the focus, as I say, of a Conservative government will be delivery, delivery, delivery. That is what now is crucial, given the time constraints on which we're all acting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Spot on the time limit. Thank you, Richard. Great. Okay. Next up, Sam Peters from the Green Party. It's up to you. It's up to you. What do you feel?
I'll sit, otherwise I think we'll all get tired by the end of it. Right? Yeah, so firstly a big thank you to GEF and Zero Carbon Guildford for arranging this, and for you all for coming. It's honestly amazing to see so many people out to watch an environment Hustings. To get on to the issue of the climate, you know, there are many other issues we have to urgently address, from massive inequality to the current cost of living crisis, but climate and biodiversity are absolutely existential issues that we need to tackle at all levels. Guildford Borough Council has declared a climate emergency, put forward a climate plan. Thank you, George. It's much needed, but unfortunately it's currently not funded, and I believe could be doing a lot better. And I hope to make the case tonight that Green Party councillors could make all the difference to action on climate and the environment locally. On the doorstep, I've been asked what Green councillors could do in Guildford, given that we only have 3 candidates running in the elections here. But as you'll see on the screen, despite not outright running any of these councils, Green councillors and members have been instrumental in bringing about massive positive changes. In these cases on climate and the environment, but socially and economically too. And taking Waverley Borough Council as the local example, with just 2 Green councillors, we've been able to take the lead on the council's environment portfolio and immediately start taking action. Waverley's climate plan was ranked 5th in the country by Climate Emergency UK compared to Guildford at 88th, for example. In just 3 years, Waverley have cut their emissions by over 1/3. They've cut glyphosate use by 75% ahead of their target of a complete ban. They're building some of the first passive house standard social housing in the country and undertaking a study on the most efficient ways to decarbonise existing housing stock, the lessons of which will be rolled out nationwide. They're taking the lead on public transport and active travel. We've got the Guildford Growing Greenway, big investments in cycling and walking infrastructure, and these are desperately needed over here as well. And I was very pleased to be at the Royal Courts of Justice last month, where Waverley Borough Council won the right to bring a full judicial review of the government's decision to allow fossil fuel drilling at Dunsfold. This is a pattern that's repeated across the country, from green-led community energy projects in Kirklees, which are saving council tenants thousands on their bills, to a green motion at Lewis Council, which may lead to the Riveroos becoming the first in the country to be granted legal rights and protections against the rampant sewage dumping we're seeing. Greens in Woking, working with Surrey Uni, have set up the densest air pollution monitoring network in the country. And on Godalming Town Council, we're helping provide funding to hopefully involve every local council along the way to further stop sewage dumping and pollution in our local river. So this, I believe, is what taking the lead on climate and environment looks like at local council level, and this is what the Green Party hopes to bring to local people in Guildford Borough.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. And next is Ramsey Nagati from Guildford Greenbelt Group. Ramsey.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming tonight. Guildford Greenbelt Group was founded on a principle, really, of...
Do you want a mic?
Can we move it closer?
Sorry, it won't help if people stood up, actually, because you can't be seen as well as heard.
Don't panic.
Hello?
Thank you.
Right, you can see me at the back. The Guildford Greenbelt Group was founded with a major part of our policy to improve the environment and to tackle climate change and biodiversity. And at every stage, GGG have worked within the council to achieve those sort of aims. We've been on committees from day one to do with the Surrey Hills, to do with green issues, and at every stage of planning we argue for the policies that would protect nature, that would increase biodiversity and would help the environment at all stages. And we give them proper weight, and often we find that we are overruled by others who tend to give housing or whatever more weight, but we continue to press for the things that we believe in, and we stay true to that moral core. The issue in Guildford has been helped by having a new climate change officer, Nat Podger, who's helped produce the climate change action plan that George has introduced. And we're grateful to have him. I think he's a good officer. I think he will lead GBC forward to achieve some of the targets that we're looking to measure and go on to improve. We don't believe in greenwashing. We don't believe in using glyphosates to kill the weeds and plant seeds and pretend that that's improved the biodiversity. We want real improvements, and we want greenfield sites to be kept as much as possible as greenfield sites and not tarmacked over. Increasingly, we see sites that are beautiful being built on when other sites would be better used for housing because they're more sustainable. They don't involve cars and traffic being increased. They don't involve the congestion that we have in Guildford being increased to unbelievable levels. And they're the things that would help reduce the pollution and the problems that we have today with air quality. And we have worked to have the air quality zones, AQMAs, put in place with action plans in Compton and in Shelford, and we continue to work for a cleaner, greener Guildford. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramsey. Brian Crease from the Labour Party. Brian.
I don't think you'll need, I'm usually loud enough. Right, I've got 3 minutes, so I'm going to say 3 things. Firstly, what Guildford needs at the moment is a green council. Not a council with a green policy, not even a council with good green policies, but a green council that has the green agenda absolutely at its heart of everything it does. And I think that's what we need, and I think everyone in this room probably understands that, although people outside of the room might not understand that in the same way. Second thing, I used to work in a job up the road in Elmbridge, Walton Charity, and my old line manager, who might be in the room, and I haven't actually seen her, Andrea, she had this phrase about not being afraid to fail. She said, you mustn't be afraid to fail. If you want to try, as we would, as a Labour group in Guildford, if you want to be innovative and imaginative and ambitious and do stuff in partnerships and with new ways and new networks that haven't been tried before, it's not easy and you won't always succeed, but you won't get anywhere unless you are prepared to fail. So I want to say that the Labour-led council would be not afraid to fail, but would therefore be able to take on challenging and new ideas. The third thing is, how do we make real change? I think it's a mixture of bottom-up and top-down. in this room, we have bottom-up absolutely in its perfection. We all know that in the last 3 years, what's been achieved here has been fantastic. However, I'm recalling Ben at the AGM a few weeks ago talking about a project on crisp packets, which we'd had fantastic success with, but it was basically the equivalent of about 1 minute of a Walker's factory production. So we need bottom-up to change the mindset and to show that things can happen. You also need top-down to actually make things happen. And that's why the most important thing you can actually do for the environment here is going to be next year when you vote Labour, because the Labour government will change completely everything that's being done in this country. And that's where it's really going to matter. You can get in ahead by getting a Labour group on the council here, because we'll be in sync and we'll be working together. At Labour conference last year, which Ed Miliband was absolutely brilliant at, he said something which I think is really interesting. He said, climate denial is no longer really a problem. Very few people actually openly deny the climate change. What is a problem is climate delay. People who say, well, we can take fossil fuels out of the ground for another 5 years. It doesn't really matter that much. We don't need to worry in this country because China does far more than us. All that is rubbish. We've got to do stuff now. We've got to make it happen now with no point looking backwards. We've got to do and have put the green policies at the heart of everything. And that's precisely what the Labour group wants to do in this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. George Potter from Liberal Democrats.
Thank you very much. Is the microphone picking me up at all?
Yep.
I hope so. Good. For the benefit of those of you who can see the slide, please look at it. Otherwise, I'll do my best to summarise. Yeah, I know. My name's George Potter. I am the lead member for Climate Change, Air Quality, Sustainable Transport and Organisational Development at Guildford Borough Council, and I am a Liberal Democrat. We have just 2 more elections, this one and one in 4 years' time, before 2030, which is the only sane deadline that has been suggested for making the transition to net zero needed to keep the global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. So therefore we don't have time to delay. The Liberal Democrats are the only party in this election who are standing with both a record of action, a promise of more, and the commitment to deliver it. I'm expecting to be given a hard time tonight, and I would like you to give me a hard time tonight because we have achieved a lot, but there is much more we can and should and must be doing. So please give me a hard time, but please also give all the other parties a hard time on their records on the last 4 years on this issue. What have we done? Climate change. Well, we declared a climate emergency. We, Liberal Democrats, led the way on that. We have adopted the Climate Change Action Plan, which I would dare to say is even better than Waverley's, and I'm hoping that will be reflected in the scorecards when they come out once our new one is taken into account. But I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I'm not promising. We've committed to making the council net zero by 2030. To decarbonise its own operations, but that is going to cost in the region of £60 million. We are committed to finding the funding to make that happen. It won't be easy, but for us it is a priority, one of the top priorities. It cannot play second fiddle to anything else because this crisis cannot wait. We've introduced air quality management areas, AQMAs for the town centre, for the Gyratory, for Shelf, for Compton. We're hoping to launch and planning to launch a clean air zone for the town centre. We are about to launch a grant scheme to help commercial vehicles switch to electric to help reduce air pollution on the A3. We have recognised the biodiversity crisis in our climate change plan. We are preserving green spaces and habitat. We are eliminating the use of pesticides, and we're creating 80 hectares of new preserved habitat at Tyson's Meadow and Tyting Farm. We have implemented gold standard sustainability planning policies. We have including carbon and energy audits and EV charging points on new developments. We've baked those into the development management policies which have just been adopted. And we are ensuring on that the council's own sites where we are building 700 affordable houses, we will be pursuing maximum possible sustainability.
George, 30 seconds.
Thank you. We will be launching an e-bike hire scheme for Guildford and Shelford by the end of this year, and perhaps in the near future we can expand it to Godalming. We are developing an infrastructure plan for cycling and walking. We're supporting demand-driven rural bus services and better bus services all round. But the next piece of the puzzle is engagement. We need to work with you. We have not done enough on it. We need to do more. We need to work with businesses, with parishes, with communities, and I am hoping in the next 4 years we can seriously explore a proper citizens' assembly. If you want to find out more, please go to guildfordlibdems.org.uk/greener. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, and now we've got Maddie Redpath from Residents for Guildford and Villagers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Maddie Redpath. Brief introduction. We're a residents' party based in Guildford. I lived and grew up here, and I'm running in Castle Ward, which is the town centre ward. So it's hard to top these lovely candidates. When I got sent the brief of tonight, I thought, how do I set our party apart from the others? Because I think what's different about this Hustings, that I think everyone on this table takes, on this stage, sorry, takes climate change seriously. And I don't think we'll have any disagreements, big disagreements, I hope, on that. But what sets R4GV aside from the others? And then I thought about what we've actually delivered in the last 4 years. So just a short list I conducted. The corporate plan initially had no climate change or no mention of climate change in it. And that's with a Liberal Democrat climate change lead. It was a R4GV candidate who got that added to the corporate plan. So for those of you who aren't aware, corporate plan sets out the plan for the council going forward. It had, on every single council report, an R4GV councillor had a section added for climate change. That was not considered. So we have financial considerations, we have stuff like social considerations, but climate change was not being considered, and an R4GV councillor had that added. We introduced Car Free Day for the first time in over 20 years. That was in terms of the outreach to see the public benefit, we had an increased footfall of over 5,000 people in the town centre on Car Free Day, and that's across two years now. We led the way on pesticide-free Guildford. That was brought to us by a resident, and that was championed by R4GV. We are now in the process of phasing out glyphosate and other harmful toxic pesticides. Plastic-free Guildford, that is something that I've been so incredibly a part of, the only councillor a part of it. Regular meetings, we've managed to get several businesses sign up and cut their plastic in their businesses across the town centre. You'll see a little block on a lot of places. Saving Puny Meadows, another thing we championed a couple of years ago. Again, resident-led, completely resident-led, but as R4GV councillor supporting that. Willingness to work with anyone is something that I think sets us apart from the other people on this table. We are willing, apart from Ramsey, of course, we are willing to work with anyone, any group, and any resident who has a good idea and is willing to back it. And we have proven that over the last 4 years, and we're willing to do it for another 4. Thank you.
And sorry everyone, you might just have to swivel owl-like around a little bit. Lawrence Dunn is from the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, and Lawrence has got the same amount, 3 minutes, to tell us a little bit about your platform.
Hello everybody. And can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Oh dear. I'll shout. All right.
No, hold it closer.
Okay. Hello everybody, and thank you for coming here tonight. My name is Lawrence Dunn, and I'm a candidate for the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition for Waverley, and a member of the local Socialist Party. I was told about this in short notice and just told I could have a few minutes to talk, which I really appreciate, by the way. And I'm not maybe quite as polished and prepared as some of the people up here. I think it's really good that we're actually having this discussion tonight. I also think as well it's a big step that things like the big one happened a few days ago, people marching in London. It's quite clear that people are taking the environmental catastrophe that is unfolding in a serious way, and we as a party, as a Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, would support that. I want to speak directly to the question of the hustings, climate change. It's a pretty big and intimidating topic to even tackle without going into sticking plaster politics, particularly on a council level. But I'm briefly going to go over some ideas that we would have for the council that might help out the problem. So we would support expanding pedestrian zones in Guildford and encouraging people to get on their bike. We would also call for the renationalisation and integration of transport industries under democratic workers' control. We think that the people who have the least amount of interest in global climate change are the people who actually live in their communities. We also think that we should protect the greenbelt and use council spending powers to purchase brownfield zones in Guildford for sustainable, quality council homes. I think there's actually a bit of an elephant in the room here, and it's not us. And that is, we're currently living through one of the worst... Thank you very much, it's a good time. We're currently living through one of the worst cost of living crises that we've seen in decades, frankly. And I think that's an important thing to recognise. And I'm just here to say, really, that this separation between the Labour movement and the environmentalist kind of cause, if you will, I think they're one and the same. I don't think they're divided in the slightest, and I think that's a kind of silly division that's frequently made.
Lawrence, you've got 30 seconds.
Sweet, thank you very much. Just pulling through some policies. A review of cycle lanes in Surrey, with main roads to have clearly separate marked cycle and bus lanes. Recycle and reduce waste effectively. There are currently 7 landfills in Surrey which cause toxic pollution. We absolutely oppose fracking and would support all investment into environmental projects and research.
Lawrence, your time is up, I'm afraid. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our candidates, and thank you for everybody for listening so beautifully to everybody. Lawrence, I think, is able to stick around. He's not joining us on the platform because we've just run out of room, but I think he's going to be around at the end of the session, so if you want to come chat with him, we'll make sure there's a little space at the back for you there, Rose. Thank you so much, everybody, for kind of giving us your initial comments. We did ask for some questions before tonight, and we did receive quite a few. Some of them are quite long and complicated questions. But nonetheless, I'm sure we're not going to get through everything that everybody wants to ask tonight, so I'll have to say that up front. We will start, I think, going topic by topic and see how we get on. I think the 2 topics probably that all of us feel are most urgent to ask about and to listen to are climate change and nature recovery and biodiversity. So I think we'll start with those 2, see how far we get, and hopefully we'll be able to move on to some other issues as well. So the other topics that we'd ask people to think about were around air quality and pollution, around the environment and our health and well-being, around protected areas and planning, and then harnessing community action. So if you've got questions around any of those issues, hang on to them just for now, and hopefully we'll get through to at least a few of them tonight. But we'll start with climate change. As I said, I've got my waffleometer. It's mainly for the candidates, but not only for the candidates. So I would ask, if you're asking a question, please ask the question. We've all been in those meetings where the question sort of is at the end of a very long speech, and it will be a shame because we want to hear from as many people as possible tonight. So if you can keep it succinct, both questioners and panel members, that would be super helpful. I would ask not to repeat a question. If you've heard the answer, or if you didn't hear the answer, we can tell you what the answer was. Again, just so that we've got enough time to cover all the ground. If you would like, when we open it up to the floor, to direct your question at a single candidate or one or more candidates, please do say who you would like to answer the question. Otherwise, we'll assume it's open to everybody and we'll give everyone a chance to answer it. And candidates, it's okay to say if you don't know. That's fine. We would much rather that than the waffleometer having to come out. So please just feel safe to say that here. So if we can start with climate change, we had 2 questions that were sent in before tonight, and I'm assuming these are for all of the candidates. I think for this first question, I'll just open it up and see who would like to answer first. So the question we've got, number one, is do you consider that our current climate change strategy is ambitious enough? What will you do to fast-track our transition to a low-carbon economy, a local low-carbon economy, and how will this be funded? So would anybody like to have a stab at that? George?
Is it ambitious enough? In short, no. We have adopted an ambitious plan to make GBC itself net zero by 2030, but that only covers 1% of the borough's total emissions. We are facing a crisis. National government, county government, big business, financial sector, you name it, all are failing to recognise the scale and urgency of the crisis we are in. It is impossible to be ambitious enough, but the struggle is that we only have very limited levers to pull at the local level. But that doesn't mean that those levers can't be used to accomplish an awful lot. I'm just going to give one example of that, but there are plenty more. We need to install 5 megawatts of solar capacity in order to become a net zero carbon council. I'd like to see us do that in part by covering our surface car parks with solar canopies. But funding for that will be difficult. So I'd also like us to look at things like issuing local municipal climate bonds so that local people can invest in the climate transition. But if we're doing that anyway, why not partner with the university, the hospital, big business, schools and individuals to achieve economies of scale to roll out solar on much more than just council-owned land? Why not set up, for instance, a Guildford solar cooperative so that rather than just doing something for ourselves as a council, we can create ripple effects across the entire community? That's what ambition means. It needs to mean looking beyond the council and look at what can we enable, what can we facilitate, and how can we build co-ownership with the whole community, because that is the only way we will begin to even approach tackling the scale of the challenge in front of us.
Thank you, George.
Yes, I think there's a couple of themes which are going to come up again and again and again, which is that the amount of autonomy that the Borough Council has to get things done is relatively limited, I think. And therefore, for a lot of the things that we're going to talk about this evening, I think probably for all of us, we've got to take on board what George has just been talking about, which is partnerships and alliances. It means working with private business, it means working with universities, it means working with other levels of local government, it means working with quangos, with voluntary organisations, and trying to put together alliances of people that can work on particular projects. And that's the only way I think we're really going to get great progress done, because we're caught up in this particular type of local government here where everything seems to be split between places. Many of you will know, I'm absolutely go on and on about buses a great deal. And it's very frustrating, of course, because the buses basically come under the county council remit, even though it's our bus station and our buses that are a problem here. And then you've got the park and rides, which seem to slip somewhere between the two, and which there was some talk about the other day at another Hustings, which I didn't entirely understand quite what's happening. All I know is that the park and rides have disappeared from 2 of the places. You can't go to the Spectrum Leisure Centre on the bus, which is ridiculous, and nothing happened about it. And we've got to, I can say that nothing's happened about it. What we need to do is work out who do we need to bang heads together to make it happen. I do think the plan is, the local plan isn't ambitious enough, but it is a plan, and it is a start. I think what's been disappointing is it's taken 4 years to get the plan out from when a climate emergency was declared. So it was a good start, but I think it's been a little bit slow since then, which I think was disappointing. What does it look like if we start to take action? I think it's action across all fronts we can. Obviously, transport is the big one. There is far, far, far too much car traffic going through Guildford and around Guildford. If you live in the Park Barn area or anywhere near the A3, really, you're going to have a great problem with air pollution. So the solutions to those are, as I say, I think a big part of it is public transport, proper buses, reliable buses run throughout the day and into the evening, so they don't just all stop at 6 o'clock at night. It's about regenerating the bus station, which could have happened with North Street development, but was voted down. It's about cycleways we talked about, but that's not as easy as it thinks. If you think about the London Road Furore, we're trying to actually get a decent cycle road made. There is, if it's not done sensitively enough, it creates opposition. So we've got a huge agenda of transport. I would personally like to see more support and help for electric vehicles in Guildford, but I have to declare an interest because I have one, so I should be careful about that. But then we've also got the other easy and quick wins in terms of climate change are, of course, insulation. So we've got to do everything we can to encourage, help and support insulation of the housing stock in Guildford. Obviously, the council owns quite a lot of housing stock, so there's a fairly easy win there. We think that insulation could become part of a landlord's charter for tenancy, so that you can look at the amount and quality of insulation at that point, which is, it's good on all sorts of different levels. I think we should find ways in which every new build, whatever it is, in Guildford from now on should be carbon neutral, it should be self-sustaining. I don't think there's any excuse for building anything that isn't self-sustaining. Now, we can do it, we've got the technology. I don't think we need to necessarily have great amounts of policies written in. I think we can do it, and we need to do it now. And a bit on, similar to George, the co-op has a great scheme for combined energy cooperatives. So you could create energy cooperatives of linking solar panels on a sort of private into a bigger basis. There is funding for that. I think it would be really interesting to look into that and see if that's something that might be relevant to Guildford. So I think there's a lot of things we can do, but they're all going to need that cooperative partnership working that's going to be behind it all.
Thank you, Brian.
Yes, a very brief intervention. Difficult to argue, of course, with higher targets and with greater ambition. The trouble is that they come cheap. And in situations of the sort we so often find ourselves in now, where our targets and our ambition is rising, but actually delivery on so many critical environmental issues is stable or declining or rising only very slowly, then that is a dangerous thing. We have to reorientate our ambition to actually deliver on the ground and find better mechanisms to do that than worry about whether our overall target should be a few more percentage points higher than the next neighbour or the county council or whatever.
Thank you, Richard. Yep. Sam.
How's that? Can everyone? Oh, that sounds good. As George, many of the others have said, don't agree that the climate change strategy is ambitious enough. We're going to talk about policy quite a lot tonight, so I'll just focus on the funding. There have been massive cuts to local council funding from the government, over 60% since 2010, and obviously mostly to non-Conservative councils, and that's not including the £4 billion shortfall for COVID spending. But so looking at the positives, many green policies for decarbonisation would either save money or actively make money, both directly and indirectly. Take community energy or insulation of social housing as examples. So let's look at community solar. There's an income stream or savings from projects like this can be used to fund more challenging or less immediately profitable plans. And importantly, councils do have the capacity to ring-fence these profits for further environmental work, like with the so-called rule of thirds, which is what Waverley are aiming to do, where spending is planned so that a third of projects generate income, a third create savings, although they may not generate income. And then the last third is funded by these two, even where they aren't sort of immediately providing income or savings. And aside from borrowing at low interest from the Public Sector Loans Board, there's also the possibility for community loans or investment schemes, other ideas like participatory budgets, climate bonds, as George mentioned, much more. So it's not, obviously these things, some of them will cost money, some will save money, and some will even make money. It's not an issue of funding. We can sort funding, it's just having the ambition and the plans to take that forward.
Thank you, Sam.
I'm going to keep it brief. Never been one for public speaking, but I'm just a bit bewildered why the person who put it through said it wasn't ambitious enough. I personally thought it was ambitious enough, mainly because it's taken 4 years to get here. The target is 2030. We have 6 years left. We have to get going. It's not a standstill thing. You know, it's malleable. We can change it. But the point being is we need to get something going. And for the last 4 years, we have been campaigning hard, the climate change portfolio holders, to get it to full council. And I got to congratulate Kate Taylor for really working with me personally. We really worked together quite well when she was lead portfolio member. But I think the areas where it could be improved, in my personal opinion, would be particularly, we need to see some deliverables. It needs firmed up targets and goals so that we have some actual measurable targets. But the community outreach is definitely something that personally I'm very concerned about. I've done a couple of, a few debating clubs as part of the council, and they always do a climate change topic where they debate, and then there's a vote at the end on whether or not they want to do the green initiative that might impact Guildford Borough. And it's actually quite shocking how many vote against it. And I think what we're taking for granted is that the younger generations are, you know, supportive or aware of climate change. A lot of them have already switched off, think it's too late. And we really need to keep up the engagement. I mean, our generation, it was every single lesson. It was every single, you know, everywhere you turned, we had walk to school club, we had, you name it, it was climate change at the forefront. And I'm very worried that we've taken, you know, we've taken off the gas. Poor pun, Ramsey. But, you know, we need to keep up the importance of this climate change crisis and make sure that the communities know, and that the politicians, as you're rightfully doing tonight, that is at the forefront of everyone's agenda. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you very much.
Points to what's all been said so far. I mean, when I first became a councillor, one of the first things I did was have a meeting with the director responsible for climate change, and we put forward proposals for hedges and trees because this would help alleviate the pollution. And we sat there and it was clear. It was all very interesting, but there were no funds. There was no budget. There was nothing. And that's how we started. So we have come a long way in 4 years. We are starting to get somewhere. The biggest elephant in the room for the council is the Spectrum Leisure Centre. That is costing us a lot of money to heat, and it produces a lot of the carbon that the council produces. It's the biggest cost going forward. And we need to find ways to finance that, which isn't just from the borough, but is from the wider community who use it, whether that's Hampshire, Surrey, and even London, because lots of people use it. And we need to find out what we want for the future and how we can make that work with a more passive type eco-build system, that it doesn't leak heat through the roof of a glass roof over a swimming pool. And we look at new technologies that would possibly take the heat from freezing the ice ring and generating that heat to heat the swimming pool. Those sort of technologies need to be considered. We need to move forward in a positive way. The other thing the council can do, I spent ages thinking about solar panels, additional insulation, heat pumps and so on. And I hadn't a clue who I could trust. You read so much about people being ripped off, not getting a good service and so on. These are sort of things where the council are busy doing it with their council properties and their own assets. They're therefore using technology, getting to know which technology works. I had a resident 8 times over Christmas period, their heating went off. And I was on the phone for 2 weekends solid sorting that out. Those experiences of upgrading the software, changing the systems that the council has can be passed on to residents so that they feel confident that the technology they're buying or the contractor they're using is reliable. And if that confidence is there, people will spend the money and do it. One quick thing we could possibly look at, which I'm not sure what the rules are, it just came to me just now. Houses have energy efficiency ratings. Once I got my solar and my insulation improved, my rating went from G to C, I think, and possibly B. Maybe there's a way where once you've spent your money doing that, you get a reduction on your council tax based on your rating. That would be a way to stimulate people to take up these things. I think that's an idea.
Thank you, Ramsey. Are there loads of questions burning on the floor? Because we've got one more question that was sent in advance, and it's specifically around green transport, active travel. So should we give them a shot at that and then we'll open it? Yes. Okay, cool. Right, so here's number 2 question. Keep it brief, folks, and don't repeat anything you've already said about travel and transport, if that's okay. So, how will you back green transport supporting low-carbon transport options such as walking, cycling and use of low-emission buses, and discouraging use of cars, and there was another question around this, specifically into Guildford as well. So, who would like to have a stab at that? Oh, look, it's popping it around. Right, Ramsey, go on, you were first. We buzzers here, don't we?
Right. Yeah, one of the first things with the transport problem, as we all know, it's a major problem for Guildford. You have one accident and the whole town grinds to a halt. One of the problems with the local plan is instead of looking at solving the transport problem, instead of increasing the capability of traffic to move around the area, we have come up with schemes that will, at the end of the day, reduce the flow of traffic and create even more traffic jams and delays for businesses and other problems, and the added pollution that brings. The local plan had strategic sites that are car dependent, and this is a major problem for Guildford. They also had plans for more car parks in the centre of town when we should be looking at park and ride systems that work, that encourage people to use them or make people to use them. Because at the moment, you can park your car in some of the park and rides and a family take the bus into town and it costs you more money than parking the car in the centre of town. Obviously, there's a problem for the council because one of the biggest revenues that the council has is the parking on the off-street parking within the town. And therefore, the whole question of finance becomes even more important. There are things that I'm concerned about. I would like a new park and ride in Shalford. I've argued for that strongly. I continue to press for that. We also must bear in mind, we have some electric buses, but to charge those electric buses, they come back in Shalford, there's a depot there where the buses come back, and they have to take the electricity off the grid when they can, put it into batteries, and then charge the buses up from those batteries, because there is not enough electricity in the town. And that is another major hurdle that is being organised to enable all the other development that's coming forward with the town centre master plan. We need more electric generation and capacity.
Thanks, Rose.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Brian, you were next.
So I did say I was going to bang on about buses quite a lot, and I will continue to do so. Electric buses are fantastic. I love the Glide buses. I think they're absolutely brilliant. But the fact is that any old buses are still going to take lots of cars off the road if people use them. The way to stop people driving their cars into Guildford is to give them decent public transport and other alternatives. Not everybody. I'm the buses person in the Labour Party. Howard Smith is the bikes person in the Labour Party. He's reinvented bikes for Labour or some such thing, but he's younger than I am, so I'm going to leave him to that. But the buses, you know, I've been dependent on buses over the last year, and you know, to go anywhere after 6 o'clock, it's hard enough during the day. To go anywhere after 6 o'clock at night is pretty much hopeless from Guildford, and if you want to sit in that bus station, particularly if you're a single woman, then I think that's is a very dubious prospect indeed. So we need better buses, but any bus, electric buses are fantastic, but an ordinary bus is better than having if a bus takes 10 cars off the road, it's already done part of its job. So we need buses, reliable, frequent, good buses first. Then if we can get them electrified as well, that would be even better. And the park and rides, absolutely, you know, couldn't agree with you more. Park and rides are the answer to an awful lot of this. But as you say, the finances have got to be looked at. But the finances have got to follow the need, and the need is to keep cars is to reduce the number of cars into Guildford.
Thank you, Brian.
I'd like to agree with Brian on this. It is absolutely essential to improve park and ride services, to make them reliable and efficient. Without that, it's absolutely indefensible to substantially seek to reduce traffic and travel into the town centre. The two must go together. Now, I think our problem on transport is, of course, at least for the local authority, and that's what our main concern now, is that so much of the responsibility lies with the county council. Now I would not criticise them too greatly. I think they are doing, as a Conservative council, a good job on many things. And I think the investment in zero-emission buses in particular is really welcome. Electric bike hire, there is a wealth of new ideas coming along that can be deployed, but very little of them that this local authority, Guildford, can itself do. But I would just throw in once more, if I may, the taxi service, which we do have some control of that, making that greener would be a positive advantage for air quality and general quality of life in the town.
Thank you, Richard. George and Sam, I think you can arm wrestle over it if you like.
Well, I came here by bus, so, you know, I think that shows my commitment.
Can you get home?
I'll be going home by bus as well, funnily enough. So there's a lot we can do on this. As mentioned earlier, and I won't go into it in detail, but by the end of this year we'll be launching an e-bike hire scheme for all of Guildford, not just the town centre of the university, all of Guildford and Shalford to boot, which I am hopeful will trigger a step change, because what you saw in London was when they introduced the not Boris bikes, because of course it's Ken Livingstone's idea, they put the bikes in first. The cycling infrastructure, which you're now seeing in London, came much later. People start using bicycles a lot more, then people start complaining to their local politicians, like myself, like all of us here, to say, well, I'm having real difficulty getting around on this bicycle, I'd like to use it more, but why don't you do something about it? And then lo and behold, change happens. So I'm really excited about that. As mentioned, we're going to be developing with the County Council as the Transport Authority a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan for the whole borough, which I think will give us, and we're going to start that later this year, and that should give us the joined up strategic vision we need for the whole borough. Obviously we've got the air quality zones for Guildford and the A3, so for instance for the A3 we're going to be giving grants for local van drivers to £5,000–10,000 grants to replace diesel and petrol vans with electric ones, and we're going to be installing EV charging points over the town to help in the business parks to help support that. I'm really excited for the possibility to have a clean air zone in the town centre. Now, for those who don't know, that's not the same thing as a congestion charge, as the Conservative have suggested, or a ULEZ, as some other people have suggested. A clean air zone is already proving very successful in places like Bristol, Portsmouth and others. And it is targeted first and foremost at large commercial vehicles. What I would like, it will have to be consulted on with the public, so when that happens, please do all write in and give your views, have your say on it. But I would like to see it as a starting point to start by targeting banning the most polluting HGVs, the most polluting buses, the most polluting large commercial vehicles.
George, we are going on to air quality later, so if you can keep it on to green travel,
fine. Well, the point is, I think the funding that comes with that and the grants to help people decarbonise their vehicles it will be a big part of facilitating that change. The town centre master plan is also something we're working at, looking at how do we reimagine the town centre, how do we pedestrianise it more, how do we get it to be a place that people drive to the edges of rather than driving into and parking at the middle. One of the things we have done has been to start closing down unnecessary surface car parks in the town centre. One thing I will say on this, though, another example of how it can affect change on this is the 3-hour parking charge in the multi-storey car parks is an often cited source of people not being happy with it. But part of the reason why we introduced a 3-hour minimum period is because it is better if people are encouraged to come into the town less often but stay for longer than to nip in every time they feel like going into a shop for 15 minutes. There are two parties here, R4GB and the Conservative, who are saying in their election literature they want to get rid of that. And which I think shows that what you need, we've got to be very wary of populism on this. A lot of the time, facilitating change, yes, you need to provide alternatives, but you also need to have a nudge factor. And it's very populist, and nobody likes to be nudged, but sometimes you do need to bite the bullet and say, yes, we will keep on doing a bit of nudging, because it's got to be carrot and stick, even if it does have to be far more carrot than stick.
Thanks, George. Sam, did you want to?
Yeah, so we all know Guildford's traffic is a nightmare. A lot of you probably experienced that tonight. And the A3 has some of the worst nitrogen dioxide pollution in the country. Tunnel is obviously ridiculous, complete non-starter, and fixing this, we need to reduce the need to drive in and into Guildford, and we need to shift HG to the M roads that are designed to take them. For the latter, I would also favour a clean air zone in the areas worst affected by this pollution. Keeping the worst polluting lorries, larger vehicles on these bigger roads. For the former, it's going to take a joined-up approach on public transport with support for walking and cycling, reducing the need for journeys at all, which I don't think has been mentioned, and that's to do more with planning. And something which is often left out is incentivising people to come to Guildford without requiring the car. Maddie mentioned, I think, Car-Free Day. I've been very pleased to help in a small way from the zero side of things the last 2 years. These have shown that town can be accessible and enjoyable when we have fewer cars out there. Like we said, talking to local shops, they saw increased footfall, increased revenue, which has also been shown in pedestrianisation projects, temporary and permanent, around the country. I would just note that some people will always need to drive for accessibility or other reasons, and it's key that this is also taken into consideration when we're supporting low carbon options. Obviously, there's the issue that Surrey County Council are the Transport Authority, but to give an example from Waverley again, what they've done is appoint a dedicated and very qualified sustainable transport officer, which has enabled them to work much more effectively with the County Council on projects like the Guildford to Godalming Greenway and their local walking and cycling infrastructure plan. And lastly, I do also love buses, but I'm more of a bike person. I would have cycled today, but I'm about 5-minute walk, so not really worth the effort. Aside from the obvious problem with our roads, the lack of safe cycle parking is a huge issue in Guildford. I've had 2 bikes stolen in Guildford over the last 6 or 7 years, and both times the police said they won't even bother to investigate it, even though one was on CCTV from 2 different angles. So if people are looking at e-bikes to cope with some of the tougher terrain in Guildford, being able to park them safely is essential, otherwise no one's going to use them. Again, this is work that the Greens at Waverley are spearheading, from new bike shelters to the Greenway, putting pressure on developers to provide adequate, accessible cycle parking, and all of the associated sort of joined-up thinking that I mentioned at the start.
Thank you, Sam.
Just going to keep it very brief because I'm sure you're getting bored of us already. So a lot of the things George mentioned will continue regardless of who you vote for. So I'm just trying to mention Shaping Guildford's Future, which is the Town Centre Master Plan, which was championed by my colleague John Rigg. It really looks at the town as a whole picture, and what that means in terms of sustainable transport means more efficient car journeys or bus routes, but also opening up the riverside, pathways that are joined up, not disconnected as they are at the moment. If you walk along the river at the moment, you have to join the road twice to get to the other side. Having cycleways that make sense in the directions they're going. So it's really looking at the town as a whole picture rather than, itsy bitsy development, which is what we're seeing at the moment. But yeah, so I mean, I just wanted to add that. I don't want to repeat what everyone else has said, so I'll let you go.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for that. Okay. So those were the main questions that we received in advance on the subject of climate change, although you might argue that all of them are related to climate change in some way. But anyway, so it's over to you now. Please, I think we've got a roving mic. Mark has a roving mic. If you've got a loud voice, then go ahead and use it. As I said, if you could possibly keep your questions short and let us know who you'd like it directed to, one or more candidates or the whole panel. That would be helpful. Thank you. There's one over here and two over here. Why don't you start here, Mark? Yeah.
Hi everyone, Lisa Ditmar, Castle Ward. I got a Conservative flyer through my letterbox last week, and it was talking about lowering the parking charge to £1, and I'd like to just understand a little bit more about, and this is for Richard I think, how that is, like how that can be aligned with a low carbon future, and are there any other plans, or has there been any consideration for the environmental impact of that policy?
Who would you like to answer that? Richard. Richard.
What a surprise.
Thought I'd ask.
Well, the motivation for that, of course, is concern, which I think must be a major concern for all of us, about the health of the high street, the footfall, the prosperity of Guildford, on which we all depend. So that basic low price, and of course it will be a graduated price, and what we concede in some cases we may have to come back in other ways, is therefore geared to achieve that. It's really to meet the needs of many of our residents on the outskirts in particular of Guildford, who really do need to travel into the centre. And for whom bus services are at the moment very little. They have little alternative but the car, and they need to be able to get that on a regular basis. It's not expensive major leisure.
Just do your status quo, you're not moving forward, are you?
So
That
wasn't the question. Has the environment been considered in the policy? Yes or no?
No. Yes.
How? Encouraging more cars.
Hang on, let's just let Richard answer, and then George wants to come in. Yeah.
Well, I've said that it's not the primary motivation, of course, and that's inevitable. But we have to. Well, let me admit that immediately that environmental considerations were not the priority. But I give you the assurance, if we are in power, we will safeguard them alongside, trying to enable people still to get into the town for their essential needs.
George, did you want to hop in on this one?
Incredibly briefly, just to point out, I represent Borough Ward, which is definitely on the outskirts of Guildford. I'll point out the mentality of people on the outskirts need to get into the town centre for everything is exactly the problem. We need to be encouraging 15-minute communities and neighbourhoods where things are accessible on the doorstep within a 15-minute walk, 15-minute cycle ride. My fellow candidate in Bertham, Jane Tyson, who came here by bicycle this evening, that's how good we all are, was literally commenting to me the other day that in part because of the parking charge in the town centre, she started getting her hair cut more regularly in Bertham itself rather than going into town. So it's not a zero-sum game. You know, why not encourage people to support their local businesses in the neighbourhoods where they live, rather than saying that everything has to involve coming into the town centre all the time?
Thank you, George. Ramsey,
The Conservative local plan added to the problem of transport by putting most of the housing on greenfield and greenbelt sites outside the town, which are car dependent, totally car dependent. The Garlick's Arch in Send, other than the small Waitrose attached to the garage forecourt, the nearest shops are 1.5 miles away in either Send or Ripley, and the ones in Send have very little parking available for them, for the current residents, let alone for 500 new homes. And therefore, they are going to get in their cars and travel somewhere else, long way away, to get their shopping or do anything. That was passed by a Lib Dem leadership.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was not.
Well, who else voted for it?
Only one Lib Dem council
passed.
voted for it.
It was
and
passed.
most of them voted against it, so please don't tell us we did it when we didn't do it.
It was passed during the time of your leadership.
No, the Tories were running the council.
No, the local plan was passed when the Tories were running the council. The actual application for the planning was passed under the Lib Dems. And whilst that was passed, we raised the issue of these facilities. We raised the issue of the fact that the houses were being built with gas-fired boilers. We raised lots of issues, but none of them were addressed.
Ramsey, we're sticking with the car parking charges and the... Yeah, okay.
I raised with one of the sites, why don't we have pods like they have in Dusseldorf, where you have these above-the-road pods coming along, and you see them, you know they're coming, they're regular, and therefore people use them more, and they're not taking up space on the road, they're above the road. And I think if we had a system like that across the borough, it'd be fantastic, but it would probably cost too much money. But that's a futuristic look for how we could solve it.
Thank you. Maddie, did you want to say something?
Just very briefly, sorry.
This is on the environmental impact of the parking charges.
Yeah, I lost track there. So R4GV has pledged to review the £3 parking review. It will take into consideration the environment. And the reason for the review is primarily because we were having people go into the car park and stay for half an hour and not realise it's £3 and leave. And there isn't affordable, there is cheap shorter stay parking, but it seems that message hasn't got across. Some are saying it's not affordable, and I don't feel the whole system when we assessed the parking prices was handled well with the businesses. So there wasn't proper communication when it was done, and we need to do that with the businesses. When it comes to the 15-minute town that George is talking about, I've lived in the town centre my whole life, and I do use everything in the town centre. Most of my paycheck goes on in the vicinity of this town centre, and that's exactly what will boost the economy, which is why R4GV is keen to put housing and in the town centre where people can live and where people can shop, and not in rural areas where they have to drive in. And to be honest, we are the party that is most, along with GGG, that is most keen about putting things on brownfield site first, and we've shown that in our voting record.
Thank you. Other questions, particularly around climate change, if we can try and keep it to climate change. There's one here, and then there's a lady over here. Mark.
Yeah, the worst congestion in the town is at rush hour times. Yep. So what proportion of cars travelling have one person in them? I can think of a number of ways of reducing that proportion. What suggestions would the panel have for encouraging car sharing?
Car sharing. Who'd like to have a go at that? That's good, you've made them think.
Well, I can offer an answer. Elect a member of parliament who'll give us the power to do what they do in America and give incentives and incentives for car sharing and penalties for not car sharing. I think I'm happy to hear other ideas from the panel, but I think in terms of what direct levers we have right now, there are very few. The only lever I can think of is the County Council as the Transport Authority does have the option to introduce a car parking levy in urban places and use that to subsidise greener transport options, but that is about it in terms of levers we can pull, and it's not, and that might incentivise car sharing. The only other thing to mention is the council support for EasyIt Guildford, which helps encourage businesses to promote greener transport options, and that is pretty much the entire spectrum of everything on that topic that I think we have direct control over.
Right, thank you, George. Let's see if there's some other ideas from around the panel. Ramsey?
We do have, within Wayside, I think, the urban development, the plan for a car club space on that site. And that sort of development could be spread further into other sites as well, which would encourage a different way of car ownership and car use, the car club system.
Yeah. Brian?
I think, I'm presuming you're thinking in this case it's more traffic moving through and around Guildford. If they're moving into Guildford, for shopping or for leisure, there are the levers, and again, I'm going to, push the public transport in the EV side. But I think the stuff that's clogging up down Onslow Road every day, it would be interesting to do research. I mean, it would be really interesting to see some authoritative research on how many people are occupying drivers, which wouldn't be too difficult to do, and take it from there.
School run out.
Yeah, one of the things I suggested, having had a business car parking space where you paid the council for parking in Bedford's car park or whatever, I found that when a space came available, you're on the list, you get allocated it. It may mean then that you're crossing the town and you're not necessarily parking near where you want to work, or you're parking at an easy place to get in and out of town. I was in the main car park in Bedford, Bedford, and sometimes it would take me 50 minutes just to get out of the car park in the evening. And then I moved after the flooding. A space became available by the pub, by the Old Town Bridge, and I moved there. And then I was home in 5 minutes, and I was in 5 minutes. I wasn't queuing up on the gyratory every time. So if they had a simple system of working out when you apply for a permit, where you are coming from and where you're going, and they allocated it more along those lines, we would have less crisscrossing of the town, and that would help reduce traffic.
Thank you. Unless there's anything else on... Okay, Sam, yeah?
On the... car sharing is obviously great. It's much better than everyone being in their own car. I've done air pollution monitoring outside schools in the town centre, and you do see every single car almost is just one person or one person and a small child. But on the hierarchy of sort of ways that we improve our transport, it's quite low down compared to, first of all, reducing the need for journeys of any kind. What sort of vehicle journeys of any kind, and then after that we've got sort of getting people into buses, trains, other sort of high density solutions, and then walking and cycling, and I think car sharing would probably be, come under that. It's really about making sure, particularly with the school run overlapping with the commute, every child who lives anywhere near a school should be able to cycle or walk safely to school. Plenty of other countries can do that.
Any more brief comments? Because I'd like us to have some time to talk about nature recovery, biodiversity crisis, and all of that as well.
Quick comment on children going to school. What I found when I was electioneering 2 years ago, by election, families were telling me their child had to nominate which school he was going to, but there was no space in the nearest school. They had to nominate one from 3, but when they chose that school, they didn't know whether they were going to get a place on a bus. They would only know that afterwards, and therefore it was a gamble. It was a blind gamble of which school they chose. That should be sorted out. That's just nonsense.
Yeah.
Very quickly, Richard. Yeah.
Well, car clubs and car sharing are inherently a good option because they can be delivered relatively quickly, but they don't bring with them the degree of flexibility that car ownership and the rest brings. Now, I would welcome George's idea of localised centres for routine shopping, right? But developing that, strengthening that is a long-term policy, changing the whole structure of the urban area. While we're doing that, we face the problem that the centre will be deteriorating further and overall prosperity of the town will be declining. And that's why we have to change the parking arrangements to allow people to get into town more effectively.
I'm going to, if it's okay, draw a line under this question because we're in horrible danger of not being able to hear about some other really important issues. I know this lady here had a question. Are you able to
I can
project?
Yes.
Yeah, right, perfect.
Hang on, you've got a mic.
Oh, I've got a mic. Okay, right. Hello, my name is Catherine Hoos and I'm standing in Shalford Ward in the elections. Does the panel believe that the council should divest from fossil fuel investments into green energy investments as a fairly simple way to green our council. And I'd like to ask first Councillor Maddie Redpath, because I know she voted against a motion to do just that.
Would you like anybody else to address the
I think we need to keep it fair.
The first question was directed to somebody and I'm directing it to Maddie. Maddie, would you like to
Thank you, Catherine, Chair of the Liberal Democrats.
I'm not the Chair of the Liberal Democrats.
Oh, you're not anymore.
Get your facts right.
All right. Oh, sorry, Kieran. Sorry. Yes. So okay. So there are copy and paste motions that national parties get, which they then deliver to borough councils. So this is your taxpayers' money going on officers writing reports, taking time to, fact check everything, deliver it to the council. It takes council time to then record the actual meeting and the councillors' time. This motion that's been brought up is one of those. So it's divesting in. Do you want to say it, George? Otherwise, I'll get it wrong.
No, give me a shot. You voted for it, you should know what it was.
I voted against it.
You voted on it, you should know what it was.
Right. Divesting in fossil fuels. So essentially, telling council workers where their pensions can be invested, right? I don't believe just because you're a public figure, you should be told where your pension should go. Imagine if you go up to a certain person on the street and we say, oh, I'm going to tell you where your pension is going to be invested and you have no say in it. That's not up for me, the political official, to decide. That is up to them. I think that it's up to the individuals and the planning if the council officers, council staff decide to make that decision, fantastic, absolutely, they can go ahead and do it. But it's not up for me, the politician, to tell me where my staff put their pension. I don't see why I should hold that over them.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah.
We don't want to have a long post-mortem in specific council decisions, but any other points on whether or not the council should divest itself
that
of those
particular
interests?
motion was heavily debated. We spent a long time on it, and as you say, a lot of officer time was spent on it. But at the end of the day, it was mainly about the investments of the pension funds. And the pension fund that GBC staff has is controlled by Surrey County Council. So it should have been a question addressed to Surrey County Council and not to GBC. But there you go.
Right, George, really quickly, then I want to move on.
Yeah, no, sure, but some facts I think would be helpful. The Surrey Pension Fund is the pension fund for all local government organisations in Surrey. So therefore, the Guildford Borough Council is a member of it. We are an employer member of it. I'm also a member of the County Council Pension Committee in my capacity as County Councillor, along with Steve Williams, who's the Environment Portfolio Holder at Waverley, who's a Green Party member who's here tonight. The motion was saying that we as a council should submit to the Pension Board a request that they divest. It's a £5 billion pension fund, about 4% of it is invested in fossil fuels. The request was that as an employer member, we asked them to divest from fossil fuels and to set a date for decarbonising the pension fund. I am a civil servant in my day job. My pension fund is also political. There are political decisions influencing it all the time. And I think this is, I'll just say very briefly, I think this highlights the key issue. We have to get real about climate change. It's not just about whether you go to the zero waste shop or get your coffee in Solar Sisters instead of Starbucks. We have an entire financial system which is investing in the things which are destroying our planet. We need to decarbonise the financial system, and part of that, we need to decarbonise the whole financial system, and part of that, not a big part, but a small part, is that our public sector pension funds, rather than helping to fund the problem, should be trying to help to fund the solution. I don't think that's unreasonable for us to be asking, but R4GV, GGG, Labour and Conservatives all disagreed. But that's fair enough, it's a matter of debate.
Right, I'm going to give... Sorry, hang on, we're going to close this off because I don't want to spend the night talking about pension funds, and none of us are going to spend the night talking about pension funds. Very, very quickly, gentleman in the middle, would you like to say anything more about this? Quickly. No. No. Let's move on.
I just say,
if we go away from the specifics, and we do know that, I'm not a councillor, but I do know the Liberal Democrats do like to bring along these templated motions to put people on the spot. But in principle, we've got to move away from investment in fossil fuel organisations. And it's going to be the right financial thing to do as those fossil fuel organisations lose market share and lose their traction in the market. So it's actually going to be a good financial move to get out of fossil fuel investments as soon as practicable.
Right, do you disagree with any of that, Sam?
No, that was what I was going to add. There's not only a moral duty, generally speaking, for everyone to divest, but there's a fiduciary duty as well. These are going to be stranded assets.
Yeah.
Your pension can be 27 times more, or changing your pensions can do up to 27 times more good than most other things that you can do, personally speaking. So it is really important that we're looking at that.
Thank you. Richard, really quickly, please.
If you get away from giving or making sure that the trustees of pension funds have exclusively and or at least primarily the obligation to maximise the returns for pensioners. If you get away from that, I think you get into really very dangerous territory. The way to deal with the carbon producers and the oil companies is not that route, but much more through other regulatory tools which can be available to ensure that they progressively decline.
Thank you. We're going to park the pensions question, I'll be glad to hear. Can we move on to nature recovery? Oh, yes, madam, sorry. Did you have a question related to... No, sorry, the lady behind you in the green jumper. Yes, you. Yes, hello.
Hi, do I need the microphone?
Yes, please.
Is it a climate change question? Because I want us to then move... Okay, yeah, okay.
Hello, hi. I am a mum of 3 children. I find this topic hugely emotional. The fact is we're on the brink of catastrophe, climate catastrophe. It's amazing sitting here listening to all... We're talking about cars, we're talking about parking. I mean, for God's sake, come on. It's all of those things are really important, but this issue is fundamental to our lives, our futures, our children's futures. I want to be hearing from the candidates about how our soils are going to be protected, how our children are going to have safe drinking water in Guildford, how any of our pollinators are going to survive. Come on, this is so important. Let's not mess around. What are your plans? How are we going to store our ever-diminishing rain supply here in Guildford?
This honestly is the next section of questions. So if
but we need to fast forward to it because this is so urgent.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. If it's okay with you, can we pick up some of the questions that were sent in advance, and I think it'll address some of the concerns that you've raised. So we've got a number of questions in the kind of nature recovery, biodiversity crisis subject area. Some of them are quite strategic around local nature recovery strategies. Some of them are quite specific, exactly as you've said. So, for example, maybe we'll start with a specific one. What suggestions do you have to make the planting around Guildford more pollinator friendly? How can we get more pollinators into our borough? Brian?
I didn't get that one either.
No, sorry, it was a last-minute one, but you can wing it, George. Pollinators. Who isn't thinking about pollinators?
I think it's actually surprising what a non-green town Guildford is. It certainly. The town centre, the estates in central town, it's not a very green town at all. We haven't got a lot of proper wildlife in town. So the first thing obviously to do is we need much more green spaces. We need green spaces in town, proper green spaces, live, not sterile green spaces. And I think there's a lot of space in areas around the roads around Stoke, for instance, or even around in Burpham, where we can have more green spaces, more wildlife. The second bit, of course, is to join them up. So that you've actually got corridors and wildlife corridors. So that you, instead of just spending all our time, and indeed discussion, as the lady has been saying, mapping our cars and our car transports and where are the cars going, we've got to look at where the animals and the birds and the pollinators are going as well, so that they've got routes through town, and so you create corridors. I think there's huge, and when we open up I think everyone on the panel here really wants to open up the river, even though it doesn't seem to happen. But I think we all know that that's something we're all desperate to do, and make the river the centre of town again. And you're going to bring a lot of wildlife corridors into play there. So I think we need to start mapping and looking at how wildlife pollinators can move across Guildford in a safe way, and sort of put them on the map, as well as the cars and the people and the bikes.
Thank you, right. George, do you want to talk about pollinators?
Yes, please. So, bee bus stops. We have been trialling those, I think, in what is the Avenue Stoke ward in the town centre, and they're brilliant, and I'd love to see more of them. I'm just going to talk just about pollinators because there's going to be more questions we're going to come on to. Part of it is, as mentioned, our decision that we want to become a pesticide-free borough and get rid of the use of glyphosate. Part of it is also things that we're already doing, such as no mow May, but I really think that should be no mow summer in most places, to be honest, certainly a lot of places. We also need to think about change, not just what we do, but how we do it. You know, we've got lots of parks which are lovely big expanses of grass, but actually if you turn some of those over to wildflower meadows, not all of them, parts of them, that would make a big difference. Same goes in our rural areas. But also we need to think about when we're planting flower beds and flower displays, do we want some nice, perfectly manicured, sterile flower displays? Or do we want flowers which are actually useful for pollinators? Because in my view, those look just as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than sterile displays. So, you know, there's a whole host of things like that we can do. And the one thing I'll say about it, in particular, is this is why our climate change action plan recognises the biodiversity crisis. There is a huge list of actions in there, including, you know, encompassing all of this stuff. But we are not the repository of all wisdom. If at any point now and in the future, please do come after us and lobby us and say there's more which can be done, here's something you should do. But also in your own areas, in your own neighbourhoods, like I do when I walk around, see, where are the patches of sterile grass? Where are the pieces of land which could be rewilded, which could be turned over to pollinator-friendly plants? Because quite often, getting involved at the local level, saying, no, I'm going to make something happen here, can have far more impact than any decision maker at Town Hall.
Thank you. Anyone? Yes, Sam and then Richard.
Glad that urban biodiversity has been raised, particularly to do with pollinators. It's often overlooked in discussions like this. I won't go on corridors or the sterile planting, except to mix them both in pointing out that the high street, I think, often has the row of planters up it, and yet you never see any insects around those, and that would be a great corridor. You know, the high street up the town, being a wildlife corridor. On pesticides, which are obviously a huge issue for pollinators, firstly, congratulations to GEF, who organised the petition that ultimately led to the pesticide-free declaration. It's no surprise for me that the three case study councils for pesticide bans, Glastonbury, Lewes and Brighton, all have strong Green Party representation. And this is another example where Waverley, again, are also leading the way. They've reduced glyphosate use by 75% since 2019, and they're ahead of the target for ending it altogether. And sometimes this involves ending the needless spraying, for example, with the introduction of wild verges, but where weed control is needed, for example, to preserve road surfaces, Waverley are now spraying or direct contact applying non-toxic options like acetic acid directly to specific weeds rather than spraying indiscriminately. That approach and many other sort of quite simple sounding things are what we should be doing here as well.
Thank you. Richard?
Well, one of my personal ambitions, which may well be a stretch too far, is to persuade some of the owners of large gardens around Guildford to surrender some of their tonsured flower beds and lawns and allow nature to take over and lead. And that seems to me is the best thing that we could possibly do to encourage biodiversity in the town.
Thank you. Any more comments? Great. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
One of the things that I know that GGG Councillor Catherine Young is doing, she's working on a biodiversity and natural environment crisis motion for the full council, once hopefully we're all re-elected or not. This will be a R4GV and GGG motion, and that's something that we want to push forward. The biodiversity is very important, that we improve the biodiversity. Surrey has a net biodiversity, is very low on biodiversity, despite all the beautiful green countryside that we have. But my neighbour keeps bees and is very keen to expand that across through the Guildford Bee Society that she's joined. And we had a gentleman at the Compton Parish Council annual meeting last week, and he was complaining because whilst the village green is all mowed by the council regularly and beautiful, there's a strip that we keep wild in order to increase the butterflies and the insects, and he felt that looked untidy, and we had to explain to him what it was all about.
Thank you. John, is this about pollinators?
Yes.
Okay, go on then.
I hear what people are saying about pollinators, pollens, etc. Immediately after the GEF managed to get the pesticides banned, I wrote to the council saying, what about taking wasps off your pest list? You forgot about that. And for 2 years now, I've been, or whatever it was, I've been trying to get them to change the pest control policy. Could somebody do something about that when you get on the council, please?
Thank you, John. Okay. Can I go back to one of the questions that that was sent in advance? It's a slightly more esoteric one, but I hope it's going to pick up some of the issues that I know we're all worried about in terms of biodiversity. So bear with me while I just read this out. So the Environment Bill states that the production of local nature recovery strategies will be evidence-based, locally led and collaborative to create a network of shared plans that public, private and voluntary sectors can all help to deliver. So it's going to agree priorities for nature's recovery, map the most valuable existing areas for nature and map specific proposals for creating or improving habitat for nature and wider environmental goals. And the question is, when can we expect a local nature recovery strategy for Guildford? What will you do to achieve this requirement? And how will you draw on the skill and resources locally to do it? George? Yep. Your hand up.
Unfortunately, the actual answer to this is there won't be one for Guildford. That's because this is yet another central government smoke and mirrors trick at the moment. The Environment Bill was announced with great fanfare, and these nature recovery strategies were announced with great fanfare, but nothing is happening. The County Council, Surrey County Council, Conservative run, has been allocated by the government to create one for the entire county, so therefore there won't be one for Guildford, there'll just be a Surrey-wide one. But if you go to the county's website, you'll see that they're still waiting on funding and enabling statutory guidance and legislation to enable them to start work on it. They're ready to go, councils up and down the country are ready to go, central government has announced it, but nothing's followed through. Now, obviously, if they ever do follow through, I'd love us to play our part locally in supporting and developing it, but I'm certainly not banking on it. Instead, what I would like to see us to do, what we Liberal Democrats would like to see happen, is to try to organise a biodiversity census for our entire borough. I would like us to work with schools, environmental groups, conservation groups, and literally anybody else who is willing to launch a major citizen scientist audit of our ecosystem and wildlife habitat across the entire borough. If we can build a joined-up evidence base giving us an idea of what we have at the moment, that gives the opportunity, that would put us in a position to be able to identify areas with the opportunity for rewilding and ecosystem preservation across the entire borough and start making projects happen. And again, that can't just be the Borough Council making it all happen. It's got to be collaborative because we don't have the resources in and of ourselves. But I think this is something where it could be a great example, a pioneering example, of the entire community coming together to do something far in excess of what central government is planning, and probably far sooner than what central government is planning. And the only other thing to mention, of course, is again a shout out to what we're already doing to rewild council-owned land, including on parks and so on, and to maintain and enhance the areas we already have, such as the projects at Tice's Meadow and Tyting Farm to create over 80 acres of restored habitat.
Thank you. Brian, I think you were next, and then Sam. Yeah.
can I just use George's knowledge here? Is this the government legislation that they were going to put in, I think, last year, and then they put it off till this year, and now it's been put off till 2025?
That's the one.
That's the one, yeah, right. Okay, so, I mean, I think the answer really is we've got to stop waiting for that legislation. We've got to stop waiting for the government to actually do and enact one of its actual principles. And I think we've got to start work on that now. And I think, I have to agree with George. I think it's about partnership. It's about working with people. The university, Zero, GEF immediately spring to mind, about working out where in the borough we can identify areas that we can start to rewild and we can bring things back. Obviously, the first part of it is to conserve nature, but then once you've got that, you can start moving to the next stage up and actually sort of restore the balance of nature and biodiversity. But you've got an awful lot of homework to do. There's an awful lot of expertise, which I certainly don't have on the biological side. And it's a matter of putting together big projects and getting the planning. But I don't think we should wait for government. I think we're as far as I know, there's no reason why the council can't just say, let's, or if you like, pretend the government's passed that bill, let's get on with it.
Thank you. Sam, you were next.
Yeah, that ties in quite well with what I was going to say. That's what Green Party councillors, again, in Waverley, have actually done. They've proposed a nature recovery strategy. Whether Surrey will be taking the lead on this at some point or not, I'd like to make sure that Guildford has strong input and maximises the very significant knowledge and expertise that we have in the town with people like Zero, the Wildlife Trust, GEF, Surrey Hills, River Way Trust. There's loads of them. Also, statutory, mandatory BNG, biodiversity net gain, is set to begin this year at least. We can make a head start with other strategic plans like the green infrastructure strategies, biodiversity opportunity mapping to direct the delivery of this. And I'd like us to make sure that any biodiversity net gain in planned developments will be enforceable. I think we've all had enough of developers who are allowed to wriggle out of their commitments on this and many other things. And particularly in Guildford, we need to have proper scrutiny of development plans for the riverside and whether this blue infrastructure, as it's called, is being properly protected and enhanced.
Thank you. Randy,
Sorry, one more thing on biodiversity net gain. It needs to be, properly done. Quite often, the way that it's interpreted deliberately is quite antithetical to actual biodiversity. We know that simply replacing an area of ancient woodland with an equal or even a larger size of new saplings is just not good enough in terms of biodiversity. There's decades, centuries of local ecosystem there from the soil up. And you can't just stick a few new trees in the ground and leave them there to dry out. That's not biodiversity gain, it's a loss.
Thank you.
GGG were the only councillors who attended who attended the local planning inspection of the DMP's local plan part 2, and we were.
Can you just explain DMPs for people?
Development management policies.
Development management policies.
They're the policies which support the local plan part 2, which is giving us.
They govern the regulation of development.
Yeah, and they have weight in planning, as opposed to the SPDs, which are guidance. The SPDs are
supplementary planning documents.
There you go. So we were the only, Catherine and myself were the only two who attended, and I attended every single day. And we were pushing and helping the officers to support a 20% biodiversity net gain in all new developments. And the inspector was trying to argue that down, but we managed to succeed on the basis that once the government's 10% rule comes in, which is planned for November, then Guildford will have a 20% net gain requirement on all new developments, which I think is to be applauded. We do have a lot of local biodiversity knowledge, a lot here in this building now, residents and volunteers, and you can see what can be done when people work together. I mean, the local community rescued the field up on the Downs. That was a terrific thing that people did locally there. We had an issue where chalk grassland on the Hog's Back was being sold off. Originally it was advertised perfect for wine growing, nobody bought it. Then it was advertised as not being suitable for anything, and logging company was going to plant fast-growing trees, not local British trees, and supply those to the power stations at Gatwick and Heathrow. The residents got together, bought the land and stopped that. And it's those sort of measures. And for instance, with Borough Fields, I argued for a long time, I didn't get there, with the chief executive at the time, James Whiteman, that we should have purchased that land from the Hampton Estate initially to stop what was happening there now, and if necessary, compulsory purchase it. Because what's been happening there on a beautiful sweep of the Hog's Back is appalling. And the costs in enforcement and trying to solve it is astronomical.
Thank you. Right, does anybody else want to say anything more about biodiversity? Because I want to just check, because the local nature recovery strategy strikes me as one of those things I mentioned right at the beginning, something the government is just moving too slowly on, and that's not a political comment, it's just too slow. And what I've heard from at least a couple of you is actually you're not going to wait for that guidance to arrive, but you'll actually act in advance. I just want to check that that's my understanding, because we're giving you the mandate tonight, so you know what to expect.
We're just going to ask, because I think we've strayed on some of the other questions that are submitted in advance. I don't know if we want to try and finish off this whole topic in one go, or do you want to stick to nature recovery?
Let's keep going. Maddie, you wanted to
I was just going to I agree with everyone on the stage. I think everyone is sort of on the same page with this. The only thing I would add to it is, yes, absolutely, we need to work with businesses, we need to work with key stakeholders, but at the end of the day, we need to work with other political parties. We can't draw lines in the sand and say, because you're a ex-member of, I'm not going to name any party, but I'm not going to work with you. We need to work with Surrey County Council. We need their support. We need to work with other people in the chamber. We need to work with national government. We can't wait for a Green MP to be elected. We have to deal with the one that we have. So I think I agree completely with everything that's been said on the stage. But the only thing I would add is that we need to break this whole political mudslinging, I'm not working with you because of your beliefs or whatever, and just get on with the job, because it's not a party political issue.
Very quickly, Ramsey.
As was said earlier, these things have to be at the core of everything GBC does. It has to be central to every single decision. The climate change, the biodiversity, these have to be seriously taken into account on every decision GBC makes.
Thank you. George, finally?
Just worth noting, just for reference, this is partly why we have a cross-party climate change board at Guildford. I think, your colleague Catherine is now an R4GV candidate, but she has been a sterling member of the Climate Change Board Committee, as is Deborah Seabrook, who's an R4GV councillor in the audience. There have been lots of people who have made significant contributions, but we've also got external members, such as the Guildford Environment Forum. I really like Sam. I do hope he loses to his Liberal Democrat opponent, but I did appoint him to the Climate Change Board anyway, precisely because when it comes to this, when it comes to getting things done, we cannot afford to let political rivalries get in the way, just about who has the right ideas, who can contribute to the discussion.
Now, particularly on biodiversity, nature recovery. We've got two gentlemen over on this side, Mark, sorry. Two up from Lawrence, one up from Lawrence. Sorry.
Yeah, I want to pick up on the point Ramsey made about getting the 20% biodiversity net gain. I, as a resident, also wrote in to the Examiner asking him to support 20% biodiversity net gain. I have a question for the rest of the audience. Why didn't you write in? You all could have written in to support that policy. Where were you? I don't expect applause for that one, but you all could have done that. So why not all get more involved in pushing the council on these matters?
Did you want to ask the council candidates anything about how they might be able to help us get involved?
The consultation was publicised. If you were following things, you would have known about the local development management policies. I just wish more people who are sympathetic to biodiversity had got involved at that stage. But so many people seem to have missed it altogether, and that's a shame. So I'm sort of appealing to everybody, do watch out for opportunities to support those sort of initiatives.
Sorry, it's just a gentleman at the back there who was just quickly.
Just to let you all know, there is a mailing list you can sign up to get GBC updates. So it's in the work in progress, but it's on our website if you want regular updates on consultations and things like that.
Right, hello. I have been waiting for this. I have biodiversity stats. This does lead to a question. Across the whole of the UK, we have lost 50% of our biodiversity since pre-industrial revolution levels. And that has led to a 2% biodiversity has been completely extinct. In Surrey, it's 13%. If you consider species of national concern, it's 37%, and another 37% are almost gone. So we've had general ideas working together, but we need very specific programs, policies right now to save these things, because if it takes another 3-4 years, that might be another 10% of our biodiversity gone. So my
specific question?
Yeah, the question is, what specific things can we, if you're elected, can we straight away do to protect biodiversity and reintroduce more biodiversity? Because the research by the Natural History Museum says every country needs to protect at least 90% to protect our food services. UK's at 50. If we're already extinct past 10% in Guildford...
Let's ask the question.
Yeah.
Right, so is this to the whole panel, or... Yeah, okay, so what are you going to do to protect and restore biodiversity? George?
So I'll just suggest a topic which I've not talked about thus far. Planning policy, which I appreciate we might get on to later, but it is worth...
There's not much later, to be honest.
No, I know. It is worth noting that we do have pretty gold standard planning policies around biodiversity, not just around biodiversity, around installing EV charging points, around insulation, you name it. We have gone, I'm not saying we've gone as far as is permissible within national planning law, because I'm sure there's some things we've missed. We've gone significant, pretty much almost as far as we can possibly go. One of the key challenges, though, is that this is a very fast-moving area. One of the, not favourite statistics, but gobsmacking statistics is the ecological niches which have already been emptied by the current mass extinction will take 20 million years to refill. That's the scale of the challenge we've got here. The extinction is going on, it is accelerating. Government policy, government guidelines, rules, the powers we have are changing all the time. The most important thing that any of us can pledge is that we will make use of all the tools we currently have. I think we've done a good record of making use of the tools we have, but we will be nimble in making use of any change in national law, any change in planning policy nationally and guidelines and powers that we have. We need to act nimbly to make sure that we exploit that as soon as possible to strengthen the policies and approaches we have. And crucially, we need to make sure that our staff, the people who are entrusted to enforce it, I'm talking about planning officers, enforcement officers, are both educated, trained and resourced to make sure we focus on these issues, because it's no good having it written down in a policy of 20% biodiversity net gain if what that gets interpreted as is, well, this car dealership had no trees in their car park, and now they've planted five trees, so that's infinity biodiversity net gain. That's not good enough. You need a much more holistic and detailed understanding of that. And I think, again, I don't think this is a party political one. I think it's got to be, the mentality has to be constantly looking for what more can we do, how can we improve this, how can we strengthen what we're doing, how can we move further as fast as national policy permits us to do.
Thank you. Maddie? I've lost sight of the man who asked the question, but essentially, I got from the question that what can we do, the day after we're elected is sort of the gist, rather than planning policy, which could take a while. But so Guildford Borough Council is incredibly fortunate to have such a fantastic parks team. We have a huge area that we control: Stoke Park, Pewley Downs, Chantry Woods. You know, there's so many areas that we look after, I shouldn't say own, which we can greenify, and they are actually doing it. You might not see it, it might look a bit destructive to begin with, but they are in the process of making everything a lot more biodiversity friendly, if I can put my teeth back in. And that is something that you can change quite quickly, because it's staffing. It's not policy, it's not something we have to go out for consultation about. It's something that the planters in town, if someone emailed me saying this is, you know, going to increase biodiversity by X amount, and we research it and that's true, then we can do that. That's quite an easy and feasible thing, and there is a budget for it. And that is something we can switch around quite quickly. Thank you. Yep, Sam.
Yeah, I've mentioned some of the issues we need to be careful with biodiversity net gain. And I've mentioned some of the strategic plans that we can use to get more of an idea of where all of our species are, particularly the endangered ones. Just to add to that, our spatial planning, it can go beyond just protecting these priority sites once we know they're there. And it should be thinking in terms of habitats and habitat connectivity from the outset. And a sort of a little more outside the box. For example, there's plenty that residents can do and want to do, provided they have the council's support and the knowledge to do so. For example, all the UK's gardens put together are nearly the size of the UK's largest national park. And so schemes where residents are enabled to turn some of their gardens over to nature, allow gaps in walls and fences, things like that, would go a long way towards strengthening our biodiversity locally.
Thank you. Next, I think.
Yeah. As I've said before, one of the key issues is that we need to talk to people like you and bring on the expertise, which we don't all have. But I think, aside from these sort of longer term and rather big and lofty ideals and names, it'd be quite nice to find a quick win, something we could do fairly quickly.
That sort of was the question, I think. As well.
And to sort of open up a small short project which you can do, which you can enact, and which you can publicise, and we can use to springboard into everything. So whether that's, you know, wildlife corridors, or whether it's taking rewilding some sterile grassland that's in council ownership or something along those lines. I'm not an expert on that, I'm not going to pretend to be so, but that's the sort of thing I think would be really nice to start with, to kick-start things.
Thank you.
I can tell you one thing we could do straight away. We could pass regulation that all trees in the borough are protected by a tree protection order, and therefore if somebody wants to chop it down, they have to ask permission, because by the time we learn about something happening, half the trees have already been chopped down. And then you get areas where we're told, oh, we can't do anything until 500 or 50 or whatever it is square metres of trees, cubic metres of trees have been chopped down, and you can't ascertain what that is, and all you know is there were 20 odd trees in that field and now there's nothing and it's gone. So we need to protect the trees, and we need to do that. And one of the ways would be to give all trees TPOs, and then if anything needed to be done, they'd have to apply for it. We'd have more control. And stop trees being cut down during the nesting season.
Very, very quick comment. It's not just a matter, I think, of what can we do, it's what can we stop doing, on the basis of, like example, of mowing of road verges and all the rest of it, things like that. There may be safety considerations, road safety considerations, which inhibit it, but we should be much more doubtful and sceptical of some of the things we actually do, which if we stop doing them, could benefit nature recovery.
Thank you. I do have a question about the River Way. Is anyone interested in the River Way water?
Yes.
I thought people might be. So I don't know if this is on your advanced sheet of questions, so don't worry, you can wing it. What will you do in relation to flood management and improving the health of the River Way? So I've got George, Maddie, Sam.
Okay. Well, the best thing we could do is to stop dumping sewage in it, but the only way to make... But unfortunately, the only way that's going to happen is if you elect Zoe Franklin to be your next Liberal Democrat MP. But there are a couple of things. One thing is that obviously, as part, we're going ahead with the Wayside Urban Village scheme, which is going to involve relocating the sewage treatment works. And the new one, unlike the current one, the new one will have capacity we need. One of the problems we do have is that rather than spending any money on solving the shortfall at the current plant, Thames Water are now currently just sitting on their hands waiting for the new one to be built, which is partly why they're dumping so much sewage in our river. And given I represent Bertham, it's my neighbourhood they're dumping the sewage in particular, so that's very fun for me and my neighbours. And part of what we have to reckon with is that we have a massive infrastructure shortfall when it comes to accommodating rainwater, when it comes to accommodating sewage. And solving that problem is going to be a real challenge with major strategic sites. In the town centre, we have been pursuing and we will continue to pursue Shaping Guildford's Future project, which is not just about finding ways to provide more housing in the town centre and sorting out the transport issues. It is also about tackling the scourge of flooding in the town centre, and I think that's and that is partly how we solve the flooding problem. But the other piece of the puzzle is we do actually own a significant amount of land alongside the river, not just alongside the river, but also things like the Bertham Nature Reserve, which is a wetland. And these spaces which are council owned are a great opportunity to see how can we exercise better stewardship of our watercourses, how can we improve the habitat, how can we make it more, how can we, rather than it just being a place to get water as quickly as possible from point A to point B, how can we slow it down? How can we create better habitat? These are all part and parcel of it, but when it comes to sewage dumping in particular, I will say that unfortunately, all those levers sit at national government. At the moment, all we can do is lobby, and I think we can and should be lobbying more and calling out Thames Water and others for their shortcomings when they are apparent. But the honest answer is locally, again, on sewage in particular, there are very limited levers that we have to pull, unfortunately.
Who else would like to talk about the riverway flood management?
Yes, I would. So like probably most of us here, I could talk for hours about the government's failures on sewage dumping, particularly on some mistruths being peddled on certain election leaflets.
Let's keep it to local politics that you've
I was. After this sentence. 80% cuts to Environment Agency funding that have caused prosecutions to fall by a massive 98%. What Guildford Borough Council can do, firstly, is support the work of citizen scientists like the Water Rangers, the poster up there, hosted at Zero. I'm one of these volunteers. I go and test 2 sites near Ladymead every month, and all this will make sure that we know what state our rivers are in now and where they're getting worse. And at the moment, that's looking like it's downstream of Slyfield treatment plant. I'd like the council to follow the lead set by Greens, not at Waverley this time, at Godalming Town Council, in trying to get all local councils along the way involved in protecting and improving the health of this waterway. And another thing that council could help support is attempts to get bathing water status for particular spots along the river, like St Catherine's Lock. Again, the government has recently blocked all but 1 new applications for this. Sorry, Mark. Aside from that, there's issues to do with farmland, flooding. Quite often, flooding management means more dredging, more concrete along the riverbanks. All that does is speeds up water. It sends it down the river, and we get flooding, more flooding downstream. We need to be rewilding riverbanks. We need to be working with farmers to cut runoff, cut pesticide use overall. And there's a lot of nature-based solutions that can be put at work here. And there is actually a talk on that at Zero tomorrow, so please do come to that if you're not too tired from today.
Nice plug, thank you. Yes.
Very quickly. One of the problems, I had a very interesting visit to the Thames Water Treatment Plant in Shalford a few weeks ago. That was quite interesting, trying to organise the same thing to the Godalming sewage plant, because I think that is one of the are big polluters. One of the problems we have is with flooding is not just in the town centre, which has been a major problem that hasn't been tackled for years, and one of the reasons why they ended up putting all these development sites on the greenbelt, because they hadn't solved the town centre. That is going to have to be an issue that the new local plan addresses and brings up to date as quickly as possible. One of the problems we have with flooding is the Environment Agency. It's underfunded, and it seems to change the model, change the grading of a flood zone whenever there's a development coming up and the developers put forward their reports, and then all of a sudden you find that housing is allowed on a site that residents are saying regularly floods, and then we allow that to happen, and then it floods, and we go, ooh, and that's happening everywhere now. I mean, the Horsleys in that area, around Ockham and the Horsleys, there are constant flooding going on at the moment, and it's appalling. And we raised this at the time when some of these developments were happening. We also find the sewage system, the pipes burst in Send. There was major road disruption for months whilst that was sorted out, because the capacity isn't there for some of these developments. We need to get infrastructure right so we don't have these problems.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, right. And then I'm going to open it to the floor, I think, for a last time.
Yeah, no, just very briefly. The problem, as said on the platform, is that government is responsible for a lot of these things, and it's very difficult to handle it. But as a sort of good, I think it's going to be a good news story anyway. I'm quite hopeful that the new SANG that's being developed on...
SANG? Do you want to explain?
Suitable alternative natural green space.
Which is being developed sort of near the new sewage works behind Jacob's Well.
As an extension to the Burton Nature Reserve.
Yeah, and it's already basically a natural floodplain. It's flooded most of the winter, quite rightly so, and to actually start to use that space for what it is, a natural wetland, instead of trying to concrete it over or try to, put the river back into its box, which never works, let's be honest about this. We're always trying to control nature, and nature always is stronger. So I think that sort of approach, hopefully we will see more of, and I think it's a really positive development.
Thank you. We are rapidly running out of time, so I'd like to open the questions out to the floor, really on almost anything you'd like to ask in terms of an environmental question. I'm going to give us maybe only 5 minutes or so on this, because we'd like to hear a sort of reflection wrap-up from each of the candidates very briefly before we close. So, any...
Can I just backtrack a little bit? Somebody over here said earlier, where was everybody when the consultation was going? And I think there is an assumption these days that if you put it on the internet, job done. Now, most of the people who are here tonight are engaged with local politics, engaged with the issue and what have you. But you've got thousands of people out there that need to be engaged in this as well, and it's not happening. Look at what happened with London Road. Sorry, the question is, how are you in the local council going to engage? How many people are here tonight?
100.
Yeah. How many other thousands there are out there to get involved in this issue and to, as you say, work together? How are you going to do that? Because it's not happening.
Great question, thank you. Yeah, okay.
I've gone first of all.
Maddie, would you like to just have a crack at that?
So, I mean, I am very open to ideas on this. I have been trying, in 2019, trying to promote R4GV was a huge challenge. In the 2023 election, you might have noticed a short video which did us all ends of favours, because everyone knows who we are now. So I do think social media plays a part in, if you have a targeted... Wait, I have a second. Yeah. Social media does play a large part in terms of you can push information to a select group of people from the area who will get it. And trust me, during this campaign, it's worked very well for one particular individual.
No, let's not go there.
I'm not going there. But there are other methods. So, for example, in this room, you see loads of walls covered in different initiatives. There's no GBC wall. There's no GBC wall saying what we're doing, all the great things, or why aren't GBC doing this, or slapping us on the wrist. You know, at the Hustings in 2023, they said they'd do this. There's no wall. There is obviously the Guildford Dragon, which a lot of people read and subscribe to. But I do think printed press isn't great. From my personal experience, is atrocious in Guildford. Sorry,
let's hear from some other. Thanks, Maddie. That's great. Ramsey, do you want to have a go?
I think the communications is a problem. GBC has improved its communications, but it wouldn't be very hard not to improve it because they were pretty poor. So going forward, I think we need to address these issues and get them out to the wider public. And the only way to do that really is by directly dropping leaflets from the council, like a regular newspaper that gives the council what they're doing, what's happening, and residents get that, say, every 3 months or something like that, so that the people who aren't on social media, not everyone is on social media, not everybody has a modern phone, do they, Harry? And, you know, so... You know, at the end of the day, the old paper way through your letterbox is probably the best way of getting the message across to everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I think it's very sad. It's the demise of local press has left us all with a huge deficit. Martin and the Guildford Dragon do a great job in trying to fill that, but it only reaches certain people. I think in the end it's a responsibility of local councillors. I think we've got to, if I'm a councillor, hopefully I'll do a much better job of actually communicating regularly and directly back to the board about what's going on and trying to get the enthusiasm and engagement from them. But everyone's got to take a part in this, I'm afraid. We're just not getting the information across.
Thank you. Richard, any thoughts to add to these ones? No, thank you. Sam, do you want to add anything?
Yes. Yeah, I saw some of the displays team at Zero sort of eyeing up that idea, Maddie. We'll see how it goes.
No offence at all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're all in Zero. This space has engaged more people than who knows how many local schemes over the years. So there is obviously, you know, the council can do a lot of work with and in supporting schemes like this or Rosamond Community Garden. There's a million others. In terms of what councillors can do directly, I mean, it's exactly that. You need to have direct, regular, face-to-face and also, you know, over the phone, online, and in literature, communication with your local councillors. And because when people see that their councillors are listening, that their councillors are either making the changes they want or at the very least fighting for them, that's when they get enthused, that's when they get engaged, and they're more likely to get involved with something like Zero or with consultations or with any other climate action.
Thank you. George?
Well, nice simple topic, isn't it? As I said at the very beginning, engagement is the big next piece of the puzzle, not just on this topic, but across the piece, because fundamentally we have a system of democracy built on 19th century assumptions, and we're now in the 21st century. And I got to tell you, I'm a ward councillor, I'm active. We put out leaflets all the time. We have physical ward surgeries where people can come along to see us. We're active on Facebook. We do social media adverts. And there are still people who have no idea who I am. And that's after 4 years. So you know, just to bear in mind.
Extraordinary, George.
So I think the issue we've got to bear in mind here is that this is not just a climate change problem. This is a local government. This is a democracy problem, and it's one. And I really wish I had an answer. I think there's more we can do in terms of deliberative democracy, in such as citizens' assemblies, such as participatory budgeting. I think there's more we can do to work with organisations like Zero Carbon Guildford, which, let's not forget, the Borough Council and the County Council did all try to help facilitate the creation of, which I think is possibly the small financial contribution I made as County Councillor to this space here has probably done more good than anything else I've done in the last 4 years, to be grimly realistic about it.
More cash, George.
George,
but all of which to say is, We need to work more with places like this to try to get messages out to people like yourself so that you're aware of what's happening. But actually, everybody here, lovely as you are, you're not the people I'm worried about. I'm worried about the people who are stuck in a council house, who are worrying about how they're going to pay the energy bill, or about white man van calling in at Greg's in the morning. You know, those are, if you want to have meaningful change and meaningful engagement, it's got to reach beyond the well-informed engaged. It needs to reach the unengaged. And answers on a postcard, please, because I've not solved it yet.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are, as I said, really sort of running out of time now, but I wanted to give each of our candidates a chance just to sum up. And I've got 2 questions for you, and I'd like you to answer them in 1 minute. And the 2 questions are, what have you learned tonight? If you're elected, what are you going to do differently? Just pick one thing. It doesn't have to be everything. Just give us a sense of where you're at, having heard the questions, having talked to your fellow candidates, and having reflected on some of these issues.
Do we also get
extremely large 1 minute time?
This is really fun.
Do we also get closing remarks? Do we also get closing remarks as this it?
No, this is it.
Right.
These are your closing remarks, George.
Right.
So we need to keep them brief. Who wants to go first?
Yes,
yeah, we can do reverse. Yeah, good idea. Loris, did you want to have your?
Sam.
Okay, Sam. We're going reverse order from our opening remarks. Your time starts now.
I'm Sam. I'm standing in Onslow. Tonight we've heard a lot of different issues. We've heard a lot of ideas. Lots of things happen, and nothing against the people on the panel, because I believe all of them care deeply about the environment. But none of us here think enough is being done. These represent the people that have been in charge for the last 4 years, and what we've learned is enough isn't happening. Everyone here is still stuck in a worldview where profit and finance is above all else, and the environment won't be saved if that is put on a pedestal above everything else. So if I was elected, I would not be confined to everything is how much is this going to cost, how much is this going to make. That doesn't matter if, in the end, biodiversity's gone, grass is gone, flowers are gone, pollinators are gone, we can't grow food, and we're all dead. Not to be too morbid, but that's sort of where we're at with the environment. So, thank you, everyone.
Can we just say thank you very much for I think in reverse order it was Maddie next, so we'll just tip the timer over. Yeah, Maddie.
I'm not 100% sure how to answer this. What have I learned? I think, I suppose there's just I don't know what I've learned, to be honest. But I suppose there's a diverse group of people here, but we've all agree on one topic, mostly. And all we need to do on May 4th, whatever the result, whoever gets elected, is agree a way forward, because we need to stop the bickering and we need to get on with it. I'm obviously part of the problem, being a bickerer at home and in the chamber. But I do think that would be a change I would make going forward after the 4th of May, and maybe before the 4th of May, but just to stop all this relentless mudslinging and just get on with the job at hand, because it's so important. We only have 6 years left to commit to this plan and get it done.
Thank you, thanks, Maddie. I'm looking at my order sheets. I've forgotten what comes before R in the alphabet, but I think it was a... Oh, yes, George, it's you.
Oh, just my own goodness. Okay. You going to do the timer? What is it? What, 1 or 2 minutes? Right.
10.
Well, okay. What have I learned? I think, well, amongst other things, there's a lot more to be done to make sure that people are aware of and contributing towards the action plan going forward. But the main thing I've taken away from this is I want to ask more of you, which is a bit odd given that you've been all here to ask more of us because we've not been doing enough. But thank you so much all for coming along to this evening. It's really great. This is really important. But there's only been 100 of us here at the start, and there's even less than that now. And the message I've got to ask you is that voting is not good enough. Turn turning up to make small changes in your lifetime is not good enough. This is a crisis. We need a revolution in what we do, and actually one of the most important parts of that is the levers of power locally, such as local government. So please don't just vote. Please find somebody, anybody who you believe in. Stand for election yourself, or try to help somebody else get elected, because that will make far more of a difference than just voting.
Thank you. That's it, I'm afraid. Thank you very much. Fabulous. Right, reverse order number 4, Brian.
Oh, I'm scared at the speed that went through. Right, yes, okay.
Sure, it's 1 minute.
It's not as easy as it looks, is it?
I think it's been really interesting to hear that essentially we agree on an awful lot, and I don't think there's been much bickering, Maggie. I think it's been fine. We do agree on a great deal, except how to actually get it done. And what is mysterious, it seems to me, is why we've got all these great ideas, particularly from George, but they're not actually happening. So I think the lesson I'm really taking away from this is we need to go back and really examine the method of making things actually translate into real change, because policies don't actually mean anything if they don't lead to real change on the ground. So I think we've got to go back and really double down on how we make these things happen. We know the directions we want. I think that we can create, with Labour help, a council which is green at its heart, but it's got to actually know how to make things happen and deliver.
Thank you. What have you learned tonight?
I've learned that there's an awful lot of people here with a lot of knowledge, and we need to tap into that. We also need to get you talking to your neighbours, to your friends, to anybody you know, to stress what is important and to push this forward in a positive way. I also feel that when we get a new council, that they ought to work more collaboratively. One of the first things we did 4 years ago, we sat in the room, we had boards on the wall, different topics, we put on sticky notes the things that were important to us, and we had a cost census activity, and it was brilliant. We should have been doing that all through the 4 years. We stopped doing that, we started doing party politics really, and that's not helpful for Guildford. We need to put Guildford first, we need to put the environment first, we need to put air quality first, we need to put biodiversity first. We need to work for these things in a positive way together and achieve something, not just as councillors, but with the population of Guildford. Thank you.
Thank you,
So I'd like to say I've learned a few more acronyms for the list, but I think I've forgotten most of them actually. From the Green perspective, regardless of the results of the elections, we will continue working politically, collaborating with one of those, with the other parties, but also as individuals in organisations like Zero Carbon Guildford, GEF, COPS, many others. We've shown we can and do get these things done elsewhere, and we'd like to continue to do so on Guildford Borough Council. It gives me a lot of hope that I know that people here tonight will do that too. So thanks again for coming. Thanks to the organisers for listening to us, and yeah, let's get it done.
Thank you.
Cool. I've got loads of time left.
Richard, you can get up very slowly while the through that hole. Yeah, we're good to go.
Right, two things, but one thing I am confirmed in my view of is that delivery is everything. We have all the ideas, we have all the targets rising all the time, and at the same time actual delivery is falling in many fronts, and that has got to be reversed. So delivery is the key thing, and I'm reinforced in that. The new thing I've learnt is come to a view that biodiversity has got to go up the political agenda, and quickly. It's where climate change was 20, 30 years ago, and we can't do that. Climate change, there's relatively little, is mainly a global issue where there's relatively little been done at local level, but biodiversity is predominantly a local issue where much more can be done, and that's where I think a new and stronger focus must come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really, George?
No, I was going to ask a question of the audience, if I may. Just very
You
simple.
may. Go on then.
Not asking for a show of hands of how people are voting, but can I ask, has anybody changed their minds on how they are voting as a result of tonight's debate? Show of hands. One mind has been changed. Two.
I had decided before it came.
Yeah, they made up their minds, yeah.
Right, we're at sort of 3 or 4 minutes to 10, so I think it's probably we need to let everybody go home now. A couple of things I've heard really loud and clear tonight. One is we expect you guys to have courage and take this urgently. And actually, we're not interested in the fact that the national government might be slow on things, and in fact, even that Surrey County Council might be doing a separate thing. You guys have influence with Surrey County Council. You can work together. You should be working together with Surrey County Council, and some of you are shared councillors, so you're a part of both. So no excuses in terms of national or county level government. That's what I've heard. Second thing is, oh my goodness. You all said you want to harness local energy and local ideas. Well, we are here and we're ready to give you that support and to give you a bit of grief if you don't really take on board what we're all able to offer. And the third thing was just a personal reflection from me is, please don't forget why you went into politics. Just don't forget it, you know, because you do. After 3 years into a 4-year term, this will seem a long time ago. But we need you to keep this right at the centre of what you're doing throughout your entire term, okay? So that will be a personal plea. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything else quickly before we stop.
Yeah. Challenge and a solution here, because we've heard a lot of problems and we've also heard a lot of need for collaboration here. The actual answer to the question about local nature recovery strategy is 12 to 18 months. But there is a part of it called Urban Biodiversity Opportunity Areas, which Surrey County Council had Surrey Wildlife Trust commission, and it maps out all the areas through our towns that we can actually look at improving biodiversity and where we can offer opportunities around rainwater absorption, better air quality, mental health and wellbeing. And we will be launching that in partnership with Zero Carbon Guildford, Surrey County Council, Surrey Wildlife Trust, who wrote the report. We've got the Guildford Goes Wild event, if anybody remembers that from the High Street, when Surrey Wildlife Trust put the garden thing out. It's pretty cool. It's going to be down here on the 15th of July, and it's spilling out into the Rotunda. This is something every resident who lives in an urban area can get involved in, and every single business can get involved in. So what I would say, in terms of us all coming here and talking about doing stuff on biodiversity, is let's all get involved in doing this. Sign up, you can go out, you can be part of a strategic planting plan for the county, piloted in Guildford. There's 15 of these herboas across Surrey, but also we can get businesses involved in them so that we've got it all mapped out, it's all ready to go. All it really needs is people. So please do get, oh yeah, sorry Mark, getting timed. So we can all get involved in this, but I would lay down this challenge to the new councillors coming in, that there's no reason you can't drag all of your membership out. Every single one of you in the council could be coming out and doing this, planting, getting your hands dirty with the community and rising to the challenge at the same level the community groups like Zero, like GF, Rosamond are all doing. So I'm going to send an email out holding everybody to their word on this, and I really hope the 15th of July everybody comes down here, gets involved in this, because this is something we can show with peer-to-peer momentum can actually get some of this off the ground and start making it happen. So I'm going to email you all. I'm going to come to your houses if you don't get involved.
Thank you so much.